Hello, this is Eric Burdon, and you're listening to Backbeat here with Andre. Don't touch that dial.
All music is the same. It's just a new set of lyrics and a new backbeat.
Well, Eric, you come from Scotland and spent many years in the States. What would you say you call home?
Southern California. No, actually, I was born on the English side of the border.
Oh, okay.
But nevertheless, on the border, half Scottish on my mother's side.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always aware of the Scottish in me. I think it had more of an effect on me as a kid than England did. One reason is that in Edinburgh, when I was up there during my summer holidays, every night there would be a piper on the hills at the end of the day piping.
Oh, that's nice.
You know, so cultural touches like that get to you and they stay with you forever. You know?
Was he like rehearsing?
No, it's the military code of the town of Edinburgh, which is actually a military fortress. I mean, it's the whole town is based on the military, and it's built on 7 hills, and the biggest hill has this huge fortress up there where they keep the crown jewels and all that kind of stuff. And there's a huge military tattoo every year, so you're well aware of the
heritage,
the British Army there. And whenever the Yanks are in, huge flat tops come in there, and that's where I met my first Americans, and that's where I saw my first Harley Davidson motorcycle. Belonged to a Canadian, and I sat looking at it for like 4 hours, and then the guy came back and I asked him if I could sit on it and have my photograph taken on it, and that was like one of my first tastes of Americana, yeah. Yeah.
You collaborated with so many artists over the span of your career till now. What memorable moment remains most in your mind?
Not one single performance, but I think Monterey, the weekend of Monterey was right out of the movies. I mean, it was a gem, and flew across the Atlantic on a virtually empty 727 into New York with Jimi Hendrix and his band, my new band, Brian Jones, and quite memorable going through U.S. Customs next to Jonesy, dressed like an old woman, you know. And, I was like, "Are you holding something?" Yeah. We went at the toilets and pooled our resources and ate it all. And the next 24 hours we spent in the elevator in the hotel, just going up and down all night long.
One of those things.
Laughing at everybody.
Who would you say is the artist you would most like to perform with, whom you have not yet?
I don't know. It's hard to say. Rai Kuda, I think.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, I've generally been a fan of Rai since he started recording.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I have every one of his records. And I'm very much a movie fan, and whenever there's a piece of music that slots into a movie, it stays with me forever. And Paris, Texas was just great. As you know, one could say more recently, Oh Brother Where Art Thou was a classic combination of a great soundtrack and a wonderful movie. The movie was the visuals were so authentic, as was the music, so authentic that it really showed what it was like in America during those early years. Great stuff.
There's a passion in your voice when one listens to your latest release, My Secret Life. It shows that you still enjoy what you're doing. There's no doubt about that. Do you feel your voice has gotten better with time? And if so, in what way?
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm reaching lower levels in my voice, and so therefore I appear to be reaching higher levels, because as everybody knows, the lower you go, the higher you can get.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, I also think that I have more of a personal relationship with the audience, more than I ever had before. And I think that's because I have an internal relationship with myself more than I ever had before. That's not to say that I don't suffer the odd depression now and again. What Winston Churchill used to call the black dog. I wish it wasn't so, but it is. And I can't explain why it is. I think I watch too much television and I read too much about what's going on in the news, and it doesn't...
That could depress just about anybody.
It doesn't look good.
No, not at all.
It doesn't look good. But then again, music saves your ass in a lot of ways. I mean, like, the one thing that currently that I always get a laugh at is that I read in People magazine that Bin Laden's favorite song is House of Rising Sun, and that he could sing it in 17 different dialects. So, every time I think of that, I know that this Islamic thing is just like a cover for
their own
another way at making more money and grabbing more land, and I think that in my lifetime I began to realize that, because I was fed with the bullshit that World War II was the war to end all wars, and then wait a minute, why is my uncle going to Korea? Oh well, it's just a police action,
right.
And then then the next one, and it's just like it's part of life. I mean, it's obvious that it's built into the human system, and
unfortunately,
the only thing you can do is just get the fuck out of it.
Definitely.
What's going on,
Alongside the release of the album My Secret Life, you also wrote a book with the same title. Now, was the book something you felt that you had to do, or were there people who actually requested it?
No, it was a self-request. I wrote a book in the 80s, and there was a girl who read tarot cards and things in London, which I didn't believe in really at the time. But I remember her telling me that, go ahead, write a book, but it's not going to mean much. But if you write one in the 1990s, which then, back in the 80s, was a long way away, it'll do the job. In fact, she added, you're going to do great things later on in your later years. Not now. If you think you're doing great things now, just wait. And I was like, I never forgot that. And I had a period of downtime, and I wanted to get involved in doing something else. And I met a Canadian in my neighborhood who is a professional writer, and he said, I'll help you. Your problem is my problem is I write and then I go away on the road and my mind is filled with other problems, and I lose track of a story, where I'm going. So this guy came on board, Jeff Craig. He's from up in Canada, and he helped me keep on track and gave me advice on what to open up and what to stay away from. And then in turn, I had to repress him from trying to get me to tell stories that I know would be dangerous for me.
With the book and the album titled My Secret Life, were there many secrets that you felt you had to reveal, or are there still any skeletons in your closet?
Oh yeah. I think when I look at the book now and I do interviews and I talk about the book, I deliberately skipped my school days because I touched on it in the first book anyway, and I wanted this book to be different. So I kind of dovetailed the current book into the old book, so there would be no shame in saying that, it's just a rehash of the same old book. So I started this book with the beginning of the animals, and the more I think about it is I had more freedom in my life and I really had the freedom that I desire on every level. When I was a teenager at art school, and not the early years. The early years in preschool were hell. I was going to a secondary modern school in England. But then when I went to art school, I was elevated from one class, one British class, to another class. I suddenly found myself surrounded by middle class, upper class kids who were from families that were much more well off than I was, and families who had businesses. And my own mom was an electronic engineer, and my mother was a housewife. And I'm suddenly in class with kids that are, their fathers own car dealerships and that kind of stuff, And then the strange thing was, this was like the beginning of the revelation of how the 60s were going to change things, is that because I was working class and from another neighborhood, these kids would come to me with their sex problems, like, how do you get this woman into bed, and then I met this guy called Philip Payne, who was still a friend of mine. He became an architect, and he turned me on to rock and roll. He was like 2 years ahead of me in college. And he was the guy we all looked up to, because he actually had courted a female and gotten her into bed and had sex in a bed, like the way adults really do. So we hero worshipped him, and I'm still good friends with him. And he stuck with the art school training and went all the way for it, and ended up designing casinos in Las Vegas.
Not a bad job.
Not a bad job at all.
No. Before production started on this album, the latest one, whose suggestion was it to feature the many styles of music within those 13 tracks?
It didn't start out as an idea at all. I mean, it was just by default. I mean, the first track we wrote I wrote with a friend of mine, Marcelo Nova, down in Brazil. I was in Brazil doing a gig, and he's a real hardcore rock and roll fan, and a big Animals fan. And he was like, "When are you going to make a new album?" And I was like, "Well, I got nothing to say, to tell you the truth, There wasn't anything really positive that I saw going around in the music world, anything. And he wouldn't let it die. And I had an idea based on being on the road with Louisiana Red, who was always telling me that he was in search of the ultimate slide guitar mechanism, but that Muddy Waters had told him that glass was the best. So he was looking for a bottleneck, and we were touring France and Germany, and so after lunch every day he would go down into the wine cellars and put his fingers in the bottle and try and find a bottle that fitted his guitar finger, And I thought, this is really a great story, So we came up with a concept of the Devil Slide, which was a derivative of a song called The Devil's on the Loose, which was a kind of a punk thing. And then in the studio it evolved into more of a blues thing as the story of Louisiana Red unfolded, and that was the first track we cut. So that it could have gone anywhere from there. But then the next track I cut was Once Upon a Time, which looked back at the glory days of Marvin Gaye. So that started, the tree suddenly was taking a branch in this direction, And then I was doing a show with John Lee Hooker for his birthday, and I'd done several of his birthday parties at his request, which was always, a feather in my cap, because he could have chosen a lot of other people.
True.
And he was definitely getting on in years, and I heard people talking. They were taking bets on how long he was going to live, and I thought, that's really cruel,
True.
This is what aging does. I mean, this is really bad, So I wrote that down on a piece of paper, and I went in the studio, and I said to my producer, I got this idea about John Lee, and about the fact that you can't kill the boogeyman, no matter what you do. As soon as you hear that boogie beat, you gotta move. You gotta get up and move. And the guys that I was working with were all from Louisiana, Texas, that area. And so I just gave them a little idea of what the song was about. And in 2 takes, they got the drive down, they got the beat down. And we cut it in like 2 takes. A week after the birthday party, and then a week later I died.
Oh.
So the whole experience of that track, it was composited into a real life experience for me, and for me, it's one of the most meaningful tracks on the album because of that.
We're getting back to the first track on the album. Listening to all the tracks on the album, I can't help but ask: are you a nostalgic person?
No. I mean, there are things that that I can't help. Look, I always say, you just want to get rid of the '60s. You want to forget the '60s, and then it comes knocking on the door again in one shape or form or another.
It wasn't that bad, was it?
No, it was that good.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I didn't have much of a good time in the Animals, to tell you the truth. I mean, like I said to you before, my real freedom days were pre-Animals. Then when we started touring, we were in the armed guard everywhere, and we were chased by fans everywhere, and they didn't come to listen to the music in America in those days. Not like they did in England. They came to see the Beatles, to see the Rolling Stones. And once you had seen the show, then they didn't care. And then the Beatles and the Stones thing drove the kids in America to become one screaming, mass, And I hated that, I mean, and I wasn't the only person. I remember John Lennon, telling the audience to shut the fuck up. We're gonna sing a song that Paul wrote. There were birds in the trees. And I never hit, a sweet ballad, and yet it would still,
Someone screaming, you couldn't hear the song.
Yeah, and I mean, you'd get so pissed off, and I mean, there'd be a line of cops or private detective guys in between you and the audience, and then all the flashing lights, and you're running off stage, and you're calling, you're locked up backstage or in a TV studio, and you're not allowed to go out,
So why bother go on stage and play?
Yeah, it was real demeaning. I mean, it really was, to me. I was so glad when people started dropping acid and falling out and just either melting into the ground or listening.
Just relax and just listen.
Yeah, and then, the big change came when you walked on stage totally psychedelicized and you knew the audience was in the same state you were in. So no matter what you did, you were communicating with them. I remember walking on stage in Arizona during the storm season, and we were in an outside park, and Taj Mahal was on the bill, and I had taken some mescaline and some and I walked on stage, I was just looking at the clouds on stage, and then I looked down at the crowd, and everybody in the crowd was like looking at the clouds as well.
Let's check out what he's checking out.
Yeah, whatever I was doing, they were in touch. Whereas, the people who were running the thing, who were in a straight state, were going like, come on, get on with it, man. Like, what's the matter with you? And that led to like stuff like, was a riot one time in Seattle when I was with War, and it was because the people had gathered on this hill, which in Seattle it's known as the Fool's Hill, because on weekends it's a baseball arena, and people who can't afford to get in, they sit on the hill and watch the games from the outside. And everybody in the city wonders, why doesn't the city knock this thing down? So it's known as Fool's Hill. And I was watching the show from up there, but it was run by the Catholic Church, and this priest wanted to put a stop to the kids, so he put one of the cruise trucks in the way of the hill, and the kids on the hill got pissed off. He started throwing rocks, and the next thing, I got on my psychedelic high horse and jumped off the stage and walked towards the hill with the band following me, and they're like, cops were like, what do you think you're doing? What the priest was like, what do you think you're doing? oh, we're going to like emote with the people on the hill and show them that we're at one with them, that even though they can't afford to come in, you know, blah, 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 blah.
Did it work?
Then the next thing, the tear gas started and the police cars were turned over, and
I guess not.
it's quite a famous riot. But it was suppressed, and no made it on the press because cops were not down.
The song Motorcycle Girl has a very independent message. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Especially the line, contrary to desire, like a reverse of me and you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's at least the one thing that won't let you down.
Yeah.
Do you own a motorcycle?
Yeah.
A Harley, of course.
Yeah.
Highway 62 is a great moody number on the album. Do you ever get musically inspired when you're driving around town?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's one of the pleasures of riding, in particular a Harley, because you listen to the sound of the engine, and you get these. It's like music, you know. You get inspired by them. But I live in an area that's like, you know, loaded with bikers and biker mythology and UFOologists, and that song is about a biker friend of mine who said that if he ever got killed and he wanted to be buried with his bike by the roadside, and some friends of mine did that. So that's what the song's about.
Well, Eric, thank you very much for taking time out.
My pleasure.